Yes, thank you for having me here. It's getting dark where I sit, but I hope my lamp is still working. So I have a very fancy title these days. I am the Chief Research and Innovation Officer at Funka, which is a small accessibility company or consultancy in Sweden. I do strategic thing for the many member states, so national governments, and I enjoy doing policy work. And I have been more or less specializing in the Web Accessibility Directive for a couple of reasons. So nowadays I'm talking a lot about legislation, but it's interesting because my first 20 years in the accessibility community, I always was the one presenting on why we should not have legislation, that it's many other ways working better than legislation. And now I'm only presenting on legislation. It's very interesting. I've been at Funka since 2003. I was the CEO of the company until 2 years ago, and I am now working more or less 40 hours a week instead of 120 hours a week. So I'm really happy with the change. Yeah. I am at home in my new built house, or our new built house, and that is in this archipelago north of Stockholm. So I'm very close to the water, and it's really no other houses around here. So we have elks and foxes and birds and a lot of nice things, and sometimes we have internet as well. So that's. I'm a person. I need to sail a lot and go. Then you should talk to my husband. He built it. Yeah. Yeah, he's doing everything, so that's why it takes forever, because he is a boat builder, so everything is perfect, but it takes a very long time. So this has been that's another topic, but let's share some experiences around that another time maybe. This house will be here forever, I'm sure. It's very built. Oh, I don't really know. I think I was well. I've always been working in policy and also doing a lot of work for the European Commission, like studies and investigations, and we have been auditing or testing accessibility in the different member states and comparing and giving statistics to the Commission during a long period of time. And then I was assigned as the so-called penholder for the Web Accessibility Expert Group. So that was an assignment from the Commission. And when the Commission asks me to do something, then I say yes, usually, because it's very interesting. And of course, now we have legislation in Europe. I'm very proud of being part of that work. And it has been extremely interesting and rewarding to be working um, with the implementation acts of the directive, and also understanding the differences in the member states and how this is a minimum harmonization directive. That means that all the member states are implementing it in their national legislation, and they can of course go beyond the directive, and some countries do, which I think is really interesting, and also understanding the cultural and tradition, the differences in how the member states see accessibility. That has been very interesting to me, because even if we work in all of Europe and also other parts of the world, still there are of course some countries where we have less knowledge on the market and so on, and especially countries where we don't speak the language. So that has been extremely interesting for me to have that conversation with both the legal people and the accessibility expertise in each country. So very, very interesting, even if I'm still not sure that the law is the sort of solution of everything, but definitely interesting.
What would be the alternative?
Common sense. No, it's we did a lot of research on which countries are successful in accessibility, and the components that make a successful work, and we thought we found that you need 4 pillars really. You have to have some kind of legislation or policy work that works, but it shouldn't be too technical and not too detailed, but rather like a general legislation. And then you also need a market with market players who know what they're doing, like certified accessibility experts or something like that. You need the knowledge of the market, and that needs to be pushing for this, of course. And then you also need the user organizations, and they need to be well organized and sort of strong in how they push this. And then, of course, you need some cultural, or the way the country works, that you have that these social issues, or whatever you want to call them, that they are sort of high on the agenda. And you have all these 4 pillars, then this can work together. But only having a legislation on web accessibility, that doesn't work. I mean, we have seen that in Italy, we have seen it in France, and if you don't have the rest of the ecosystem around it, it just doesn't work. And when we have been measuring the level of accessibility in the member states, we saw that we had a couple of really well-performing countries without legislation, and we had some countries with legislation that was not performing so well. So, it's a complex ecosystem where legislation can certainly be one thing, but it isn't everything. And I think a lot of my work in the US has made me aware that legislation can be used in many different ways, and not always so positive. And I also see the difference between, just for example, Sweden and Norway. We are very close. We are sort of siblings, more or less, speak more or less the same language. The communities are the same. The countries are, welfare states. We're very, very similar, the 2 systems, the societies. Norway has legislation on web accessibility since many years, and Sweden didn't. But still, so all our clients in Sweden said, we want to do something that is good for people with, and we want it as we can. Because all our Norwegian clients said, how much do we really have to do to comply with this legislation? So it's supposed to be the minimum, but it became the maximum. And I just feel that I don't meet many people who wake up in the morning and say, wow, today I'm not going to break the law. That's not really the driving force behind innovation or good design, or doing things at all. So
if I can conclude,
sorry.
sort of,
Yeah.
They have a motivation, which is nice, but it's actually the wrong motivation.
Yeah, exactly. So I think promoting accessibility as something that is really valuable and good design, and it has to do with quality and all of that. If you can make people do accessibility for the right reason, then I think that will be much more successful than saying, if you don't do this, you will go to jail. I just don't see that as the best way of pushing people.
And is this difference also there on the long term, or is it just after implementation, for example?
Well, we don't know what the Web Accessibility Directive will bring us, of course, because we are still waiting for the 23rd of September. So let's have another chat in a couple of years and see if the world has become extremely much successful. I think long term, I think it's more sustainable if people understand why accessibility is important than that they, just I need to do this because it's the law. I don't think that is sustainable. But I mean, the Web Accessibility Directive has done many good things as well. And one thing is, of course, putting this topic on the agenda. So we have now much more people speaking about accessibility and being aware that this is something. So, and that for that reason, the legislation is really powerful, of course.
Yeah, because I also see a question in the chat. Somebody's asking, can legislation lead to a culture change?
That is a very good question. I don't know, of course, but let's see if that could happen. I think that is what the disability organizations is usually saying as an argument, using that as an argument, is that we just want to show what kind of society we like. And I agree with that idea. It's like gay marriage. We want that to be allowed, not because every gay person wants to get married and important. It shows what kind of society we want. And in that respect, I think the law is really good because it shows that accessibility should be the baseline. We don't accept anything else. Accessibility needs to be there. So if you sort of come from that angle, I think the law can really help support the way we want to shape our societies.
Yeah, I can imagine it does bring in some knowledge, even if it is with the wrong motivation at first. And maybe you said it as well a little bit. It's sort of an awareness tool, I guess, getting like a legislation out there.
Yeah, and what I really like with the directive is that the enforcement procedure is so clever. I didn't write that, but it is really good. It is really, really good because you have the monitoring, sort of the policing from above, and then you have the feedback mechanism, which means sort of a bottom-up perspective where the users can also feedback and get be involved. And then sort of in the middle, you have the legal entities, the public bodies that are covered by the legislation. They need to declare their accessibility. So that these three parts really work well together, I think. Because the declaration thing, the statement, really means that you have to know your status of accessibility. So you really push the public audience, the public sector bodies to maybe not understand if they and if the is going to work well, and if we can get the people with disabilities and their organizations and all the individuals to give concrete and nice and constructive feedback, not just yelling that everyone is an idiot, but really, really telling them, I have this screen reader in this version with this browser and this doesn't work, please help me. Then they will be extremely helpful and also point to problems that the public sector bodies can fix. And if that will work well, the way it's sort of written, I think it has a great potential to make a difference.
So let's say I am a person with a disability. I open a website that should be accessible, and I run into something. What do I do?
Well, you get angry first or disappointed, but
usually really, we just go away. We just close the website and go somewhere else. Yeah.
And that is a pity. I really understand it, and I do it myself. I mean, I have a very bad eyesight, and if I can't enlarge things, then I just go somewhere else. So I completely understand that. But really, I think it could be extremely helpful if everyone, me including me, who are encountering problems, would find the accessibility statement and the feedback mechanism and just explain why this is a problem and how it could be solved, if you know how it could be solved, but at least tell the public sector body responsible person who needs to take care of this, that really this is what is happening to me and please me out, because that we have clients who say no one is complaining, so I don't think there's a problem with my website. Yeah. So it's really the lack of awareness and knowledge is enormous, and now it will be even larger because we have like 7 million interfaces or something that is now covered by the legislation. So a lot of people who are new to this topic will, you need to knock on their door to tell them they have a problem. It's a pity that needs to be done, but I think all the users can really help.
So if there's a declaration on the website for accessibility, should it also state who to contact or where you can complain?
Yeah, mm-hmm. That is part of the legislation. Yeah, okay. That's a requirement. You should have a statement. In the statement, you should have a feedback mechanism, which could be a form or an email address or something, but it says a mechanism, so it could be something else. And you have to state if something is not accessible that should be accessible, then you need to tell the user what you're going to do about it. So either you claim disproportionate burden, or you say, hey, we are just fixing this, so please, excuse us 2 weeks because we're doing this now. But then you also need to provide an alternative format. So if something is not working, then you as a user have the right to get the information in a format that works for you.
So you have to start a conversation really one way or another.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you have to tell them that it's a problem. But if they don't respond to your request within a reasonable time, very legalistic reasonable time, but more or less 2 weeks, then you have the right to complain.
Okay.
So you start with a conversation to the public body that you are talking to, the municipality or whatever, and if they don't respond to you, or if they don't deliver your the content that you need in alternative format that you are satisfied with, then you have the right to complain to the official monitoring body or the ombudsman, or that's different in different member states, but there must be a public body who is taking care of the complaints, and then the public sector body could have a fine if they are still not doing what they should do. Then they need to pay for it. So they should behave.
So there should be a fine.
Yep.
When it's not fine, of course. Yeah.
There will be a fine if they don't. But
can you repeat the last bit, maybe? Yeah. Sorry, you stuttered a bit there.
So the fine process is not immediate. You need to complain, and then the authority will ask them to remediate, or to provide the service first, and then if they don't do that in a timely manner, then they will be fined.
Yeah, so you cannot simply complain about 20 websites at the same time or something and hope that they find them all.
No, it's a little bit, the legislation is not written in a way to sort of promote activism in that respect. But really, the other way of getting a fine is that the monitoring body is monitoring you, and they see that there is a problem with the website, and then if you don't remediate, then you can also have a fine.
So that's the top down, basically.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So each country then has a monitoring body, and I assume they have like a team of specialists that check websites or something?
Yeah, they should have, and that differs a lot between the member states, I can tell you. It's a difference. Some member states already had legislation from before the directive, and they have sort of just updated their things. But in some countries, we didn't have legislation before, so we need to build up this structure, and that, of course, takes time. And right now, I think most of the member states are looking into different kind of automatic tools to help them, to support them in the monitoring, and also training people to become experts so that they can get help. And in some countries, they are procuring the monitoring process, so to speak. They haven't got experts enough in-house, so they are buying that expertise from outside of the authority.
But hopefully within the same country.
Yeah, I think so. But there are some countries where there are very few experts.
And are you in a position to make a comparison between different EU countries? Like how well is accessibility organized right now, or what is the quality of websites?
I can't tell you the quality of websites. I don't know, because we have stopped as the assignment we have had from the Commission to make studies comparing. That stopped when the directive entered into force, because now the idea is that the monitoring bodies is going to report to the Commission. And the monitoring hasn't started really. So right now, I don't believe anyone can make a comparison about the status of the webs right now, because we are in between two monitoring, two ways of monitoring. I I do know some of the problems that some of the member states have, but as I'm also trying to support them, I'm not really happy to point fingers
No,
to
no, no.
ones who are maybe not doing so well. But I think I can say that many member states are struggling with this. They find it difficult, and they find the directive very hard. And I mean, during the negotiation process, many member states said that it was absolutely unreasonable. There was too much, it was asking too much. It would be extremely expensive. This is so complicated. We have no ideas about how many websites there are at all in the
You've heard
public
all
sector.
the excuses, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
But I don't think it's only excuses. I think they're also, I mean, I think it was honest. They said, we have no clue. We have no idea how to do this. So, and also, and I mean, especially in countries where they didn't find any experts. So they said, how are we going to do this? We would like to do it, but we have no idea on how. So
at least they would like
it's
to
not,
do it. That's the good part, right?
yeah, well, they say they. Yeah.
So I've got a question from the chat, and if there are more questions, maybe this is a nice moment to ask some. Somebody is asking, what about the European Accessibility Act? What are the requirements of e-commerce companies? Are they the same? An accessibility statement and a feedback mechanism? Is that also what will be required for
No.
e-commerce?
No. So we have now the current legislation in Europe. I'm only talking about Europe.
Yeah.
That is public sector bodies and what is called bodies governed by public law. So that means essentially it could be NGOs or private sector or whatever, but they should be funded by tax money, and also led or managed by the government or the region or the municipality. For example, in many of the Nordic countries, we have private schools, we have private hospitals and dentists and so on, but that's still, the service is still paid for by the government, so that's why they're also covered. E-commerce and any other sort of real commercial thing is not covered by this legislation. But we have a new law coming up. Last April, the Commission decided about the European Accessibility Act, which is another directive, and that will enter into force in 2025, and that will cover e-commerce.
Okay, and then can I just bring back the question you mentioned earlier? You said you had a presentation and somebody asked you, why didn't I hear anything? I guess you're going to get that even more when it's going to strike e-commerce probably, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. They sort of complained to me that, why didn't anyone tell me this before? And I say, hey, yeah, it's really funny because I'm doing, like, I don't know, I haven't counted, but at least once a week, sometimes 4 or 5 times a week, I do webinars and presentations and trainings on these legislations since 2016. So it's really funny that people sort of wake up a couple of weeks before the deadline and say, hey, why didn't anyone tell me about this? Yeah, that's really funny. But it's true. Some of the banks they have started to understand that the Accessibility Act will come. So the banks, I think, are sort of front runners there. They have woken up already. But the e-commerce, I think we will have to.
Well, I work for a bank, so
yeah.
I hope we have woken up. But I can also say I don't think they've all woken up.
Maybe not, but as generally, I mean, as a sector, I think the banks are usually, than many of the other companies, usually also covered by other legislation. So accessibility is not completely new to them, even if it's more accessibility maybe in the built environment and so on, but still they have an organization where compliance is sort of built into it. And so I think the banks are doing fairly good if you compare to other private sector entities.
Good reason too. Yeah, because I don't usually work with policy much. I have a team of people who I work with, and they trust me, which is really nice. And I can tell them, hey, if you improve this, I think it will make people happy. So that's really good, but also bad because I don't know much about policy. But if I understand correctly, a bank is pretty much obliged, just like government, because it's an essential service, right?
Not in the sense of the directive. In Finland, they have chosen to widen the scope, as some of the member states do go beyond the legislation. So the directive does not cover banks, but in Finland they have decided to widen the scope so that banks and financial institutions are also covered. But you will be covered by the European Accessibility Act. So in 2025. This will hit you as well.
Yeah, it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
And yeah, everybody keeps talking, at least in my tiny little accessibility bubble, about September. So can you explain shortly what's so special about this month? What is the deadline that we're dealing with right now? Could you shortly explain that?
Yeah, when the Web Accessibility Directive entered into force, it was put there with some grace periods, so that people could prepare and work and do stepwise enter into this beautiful landscape of accessibility. So we had different deadlines, and now the 23rd of September this year is sort of the big deadline, because now all public websites need to be accessible, and after all the videos, not live video, but all the pre-recorded videos that are published after the 23rd of September this year need to be accessible, and also the intranets that were published after 23rd of September last year, so
Yep.
2019, need to comply with the legislation, and also documents published after the 23rd of September 2018. So all of these items need to be accessible as of the 23rd of September. And then the last grace period is to the 23rd of June next year, where the apps need to be accessible as well.
Okay. So let's say I'm going to sleep on the 22nd, and I will wake up on the 24th. I think that would be really amazing. I could catch up on some sleep. What will I notice? Will I notice something?
I have no clue. I don't think that things goes that fast, and I don't think that. I shouldn't guess, but I think at least half of the public sector bodies are not finished on the 23rd. I think they will be working hard on their accessibility statements and trying to claim disproportionate burden and explain why they're not ready, and then they will keep on working, and then hopefully maybe in January or something, then we will see the big change, because it's obvious to me that people have started to work on this too late. And I must say, as is not an excuse, but I think an explanation, in the Corona time, many of the public sector bodies, they were completely overwhelmed by other problems that was more pressing to them. So the whole spring, even if they did plan to do things, the spring was crazy for them. So I think they my feeling that most too late, really.
Yeah.
So I would be surprised if the world would be completely accessible in the 24th of September, but let's hope so.
It would be a welcome surprise, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But basically, they had some issues in the last few months, maybe, which might buy them a small extension, but they don't have much time, do they?
No, it's true.
And they will more likely be working on explaining why they didn't finish it instead of actually solving.
Yeah, some of them. I mean, it depends. Again, if you are like a mature organization that understands why accessibility is important, I think they will focus on priority and do the most important things first, and then plan for the rest. But some of the organizations that are really new to this and who don't really understand why this is important, they just have somebody told them it's a law coming up, then I think they go in sort of the defense mode, and the defense mode is for sure please help me write an accessibility statement that makes me, not go to jail. So it's a maturity process, and we try to avoid just helping clients with statements, because that doesn't really help anyone. Well, it does help a little bit, but really we should, if they want to pay us something, they should pay us to help them, to support them become accessible, and not something else. So
Yeah, because they will only be extinguishing a fire, and a new fire will pop up really soon afterwards.
yeah.
So just to get an impression, are these fines, are they decided for each country, or is there like a European fine, or how does that work?
It's national.
National. Okay, so it could be
Yeah.
a low fine, it could be a high fine, it could be determined by company size, could be anything.
Well, the way it should be determined is in the implementation acts. So you are going to look at the size of the organization, so the resources, and also the type of organization, like the social security agency is kind of more important than the, I don't know, financial institution or something. So what is really where people, or the municipality is more important than the high level government, maybe because it's closer to people. So the type of organization is also important. And then how often this interaction is taking place, and how long the period of contact is. So that is defined, sort of how you measure this, because a small municipality where I don't know, where you ask for a permit, something you may once in your, so it will be weighted as or balanced as less important, if you will, than the social security system, where you need to apply for some kind of support because you're ill or something like that, and that is something you can do often, or you need to do it every week maybe, or something like that. So there is a balance. Some things are more important than others, and also the size of the organization, of course. And then it's going to be determined, the level of the fine. And of course, we have different cultures or systems of traditions. I think legal traditions that makes it a bit different between different countries. But this is not GDPR, so it's not like it's going to be huge. Not any of the member states that I know of are planning to have big fines that are really sort of hurting.
Yeah.
It's also a bit counterproductive to fine governmental, taxpayers. It's a strange way of doing things. It's like a vicious circle of the money. So
we get a small stick, but it's at least a stick.
It is a stick, and I think it could be reasonable. We can compare with the Norwegian legislation that is, they're outside of the EU, but they're sort of doing similar things, and they have been doing this for a long time. And they had, we've been involved in legal things there, where a big airline company, their fine was like 20,000 euros per day, and so until they fix it. And then we had a small municipality, a very, very tiny one. Norway has like 480 or something. I mean, it can be 5 people are a community. But the small municipality, and they got a fine of, if I remember correctly, 2,000 euros per day. So a big difference there between a municipality and a commercial company.
Yeah, in my experience, also the impact of whatever news is focusing on it could be even bigger and worse. Like if you're gonna say municipality X discriminates against people, that probably has more impact.
Mm-hmm. And I think at least in the northern part, or Central and Northern Europe, the shame culture is really prominent. So it works just to have a list, and you don't want to be in the bottom part of that list. So I think as long as the monitoring agency is going to publish the results of the monitoring, I think that will be more useful or powerful than the actual fines. And I agree with you, it's the media coverage that makes it bad. It's really bad news to be in the newspaper with that article, so to speak.
but if I understand correctly, then transparency could play a role in this.
Oh, definitely, most definitely. And I that's one of my failures in the implementation acts. We couldn't get into the legislation that you need to publish it. That I would have liked to have that, but some countries in the south don't really have that tradition. So that was impossible to get through the negotiation process.
Yeah, you have to find different ways. I've got some
Yeah.
questions from the chat again. This one a bit more practical, I guess. Also, is there any overview of the differences between EU countries? Like in some countries, schools or public schools are in this law, and others are not. Is there like an overview for this? Do you know?
Not an official one. We are working on it, and I do have a list, so I can share what I know afterwards in an email, in a sort of private conversations. I can do that, but there is a website or a web page on the Commission website. I can send you the link afterwards. I can't find it now because the Commission web is nowhere to be found. So, but they have a list where you can look at each member state, and you can see the monitoring agency, and you can also get a link to the legislation. The problem is that all the legislations are in the local languages.
Yeah,
so
it's really hard to create an overview.
If you don't know all the 28 languages, then you have a problem. So, but yeah, I hope we will soon be able to publish something. I also need to get some permission to do that, but there are some interesting differences, of course, and I think it would be valuable for the market to know, if not something else. And this. It's interesting that the directive was pushed from a free market, the inner market perspective. This is not a legislation that has come through the social parts of the EU or inclusion. That's not the reason it became the reality. It's an inner market perspective that pushed this legislation. So it all has to do with business.
Yeah, that's a whole different route. Well, it would be really nice if there was a body who could.
The only way to push it through, though. It wasn't possible if we didn't do it that way.
No, you're happy with the options you get, I assume. That's very understandable. It would be really nice, I think, if there was a body who could take this upon themselves and create an overview. I think that could be valuable.
Yeah, there will. Sorry, but there will be in a couple of years. There will be some kind of observatory, because the Commission has made a call for a research project. They have funded a research project for an EU observatory where they want a consortium of academics and specialists to collect information about the Web Accessibility Directive, and also about the monitoring results and everything like that. So that's just it's not really public yet, but it will be. So it will become something that I hope will be also really helpful and open and transparent. But that's the idea from the Commission.
That's the hope. Yeah. Another question I have is, how is it allowed that a country making a law to conform to the UN treaty can simply make such a statement like, well, these things, like things which get government tax money, are exempted? So, for example, there's a Dutch a broadcast company that gets exempted. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Where do the exemptions come from? Do you know that?
Well, the broadcasting companies, that is an exemption in the directive.
In the directive.
So
okay.
There are two in the directive, yeah. So that's EU-wide. But usually the public broadcasters have other accessibility regulations nationally. I mean, I don't know of any public broadcaster that is completely out of accessibility requirements, because they usually have a lot of accessibility rules from different parts of the legislation. But the public broadcasters and the NGOs are exempt already in the original text from the directive.
Okay.
I think the big scandal is that the Commission is exempt as well.
The Commission itself?
Yeah.
So if there is ever an overview made by the Commission, it could be not accessible?
Oh yeah, most probably, I would say.
Oh, that's a surprise for certain. Yeah, I guess that has been a topic of discussion.
Yep. But I'm happy for anyone who wants to raise it again. I think that could be sort of, it needs to be repeated a couple of times, and I would be happy if someone else would do that instead of me, because they're a bit tired of me talking about it. But,
and where could that question be raised? Because hey, making noise, that's cool.
Yep.
Where can we make this? Where can we raise the question?
Oh, there are, the commission, the sort of inclusion part of the commission is quite active on Twitter. So there's a specific, it's called the Better Web or Better Net or Better Internet or something like that. I can't remember the Twitter handle, but that goes directly into the unit that is responsible for the Web Accessibility Directive, for example. Also, you can contact your local MEP to push for the parliament, because I think that would need to come from the parliament, and the parliament is, they're obliged to listen to the people. So, and the parliament is also not accessible, of course. So that's one way, and then there's also a feedback mechanism on the Commission, on the European Commission website, where they talk about the sort of the ecosystem of the legislation. The European disability strategy and the three big directives. So the procurement directive, the Web Accessibility Directive, and the European Accessibility Act. They sort of present this whole ecosystem, and there you can also give feedback. And there is usually, they have public consultations quite often when they work on the strategy and the initiatives. So there's also always a way, and you do get an answer if you contact them. It takes time.
I see a link in the chat already. Better Net for EU.
Yeah,
that's the Twitter handle. Okay,
yep.
I'm not gonna ask people to complain, but I think I will. That's what we can do, right?
You can question it, because the directive is also another good thing in the directive is that it will be analyzed after 5 years, I think. So the first monitoring reporting period, and then some other research done, and then it will be analyzed. And there's a possibility to, for example, widen the scope or take out some exemptions, or what I think will happen is that the live videos will probably be included instead of exempt, because then the whole argument for taking out the live videos is that it was so, at the time where they wrote the original text, it was very expensive and difficult to caption things live. But that technology is now easy. So the directive is a law, but it will possibly change and improve. So
in my opinion, usually when you have the money to broadcast something wide, you probably also have the money to have it translated or subtitled, or these are usually not the smallest companies or organizations.
No, exactly. But it's interesting, the captioning and audio description. I think that is what we get most questions about.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's cross media. And so the US has had the ADA, for example, for quite a while. Have you seen effects of the ADA being active in the US? Has that had an effect on websites in the EU as well, you think? And follow-up question, if we get legislation in the EU, will websites outside of the EU also notice this?
Yeah, I think the set of US laws, which is not only the ADA, but also the Section 508, and also it's not only federal, it's another ecosystem. It's a long story, but I think that has been extremely powerful and helpful, and it has made the US one of the most accessible places, really, because I think it is. It is very sort of visual impaired focused for several reasons, which is a pity, because we see accessibility as a much more holistic thing. But it has really pushed accessibility a lot. So even if I don't like the sort of litigation way of doing things, just because I'm European, I think it has been very successful. And also, still many people with severe disabilities, if they want to go to study at the university level, almost everyone goes to the US because that's where you get all the support, and also the campus is accessible. And it's a completely different story than the European universities generally. So whatever you think about the US these days, I won't go into that discussion. They are really, really front runners when it comes to accessibility. Also the market. I mean, we have the best colleagues there, and so on. So it has been very successful. And of course, we have been looking at the US example when we wrote the strategies and the directives in Europe. But also Canada, of course, and also some of the national laws that was already in place when the directive was written. So US is definitely one of the inspirations, if you will, but also in how we don't want to do it in Europe because of the cultural differences and so on.
So it's a lesson both in a good and a bad way, I guess.
Yeah. And your second question, will the rest of the world notice? I'm not really sure how other continents, I'm too ignorant about Asia, for example, but really, and I don't know how much you look into legal issues of other countries, because I think it's sometimes the societies are so different, so it's really hard to compare. But what is really expanding or being exported, so to speak, outside of Europe is the EN standard. So that has been implemented in Australia. That is used in South America. I have been teaching ministries and government authorities in Kenya about the EN standard. I mean, that is really being used worldwide. It's a European standard, and it's a big success outside of Europe. So that is something we can be proud of. And I think that will really change, harmonization and the way digital accessibility is seen in the world, to have a common understanding of that, that's really interesting.
Yeah, you might be reaching a new public that way. That's really
Oh,
interesting.
definitely. Yeah, definitely.
And I also asked the question because of some experience. I saw, for example, a web shop, a web store of an international company. They got sued in the US. They improved their website, and you notice this in the EU as well. Or if we talk about the GRPD, there are US websites that I cannot visit because they are closed to European visitors. Is this something that can happen the other way around as well?
Well, probably, but I mean, accessibility is a much smaller thing. I mean, GDPR is really it's hard to compare. I think I can't see that anyone would not allow you to visit the website. But what is happening is that when you get this the threat of getting a fine, then people take down their websites instead, or they take down the specific thing. So that, I think, is what we can foresee will happen, which is the really, really bad thing about laws. Again, now I'm back to the law is not the solution kind of, because that is what is happening.
Yeah, they take away the risk and don't add a solution.
Yeah. And that is also what we have seen in the US in the last couple of years, if you have followed that discussion or debate, that some absolutely not the big companies, not the good guys, but some companies are pushing for threatening with litigation and threatening on really high amounts. I mean, in the US, it can be really expensive to have legal trouble. So you push a person with a disability in front of you and say that, hey, this person had this problem, and if we don't agree on something, then this will cost you a lot of money. And they, of course, somebody is earning that money. Hopefully the disabled person is also getting something, but I think the lawyers get the most of it. And then they leave this, but the website is still inaccessible.
Yeah, it becomes a business. That's the whole litigation culture. Not something I think we need to import necessarily.
No.
And you say you'd rather have people motivated, like in a more positive way. So what I'd call, I think, intrinsic motivation. What would be your favorite tools of reaching that?
Well, what we try to do is really to make our clients meet persons with disabilities so that they understand what we are talking about. I think that super easy basic awareness thing is so important. When people don't understand the accessibility issue, in my view, it's almost always that they have nothing to relate to. It's just people with disabilities, just a target group. It's something far away from you, and they have no idea what it's about. So just meeting persons with disabilities usually get them to feel that this has to do with humans, and then most people you can talk to most people because I mean, I did meet one of my first weeks at Funka in 2003. This was long ago, but I remember that one of my first sort of client meetings was at an insurance company, and it was a good meeting, and I was happy because I made one of my first presentations, and I really thought that I was, having a good argument, and I thought I was going to get this big client back home. And then one of the really big bosses said that, hey, this all sounds good, but as we are an insurance company, we don't want them as our clients. So why on earth would we make our website accessible?
You gave them a filter that they would actually like to use.
Yeah. So, and I was in complete shock. I had no arguments left. But that is a rare thing. It's very rare that people say that in your face, or like we don't want them, or we don't like people with disabilities. I think that is rare. So most people, when they understand the issue and when they realize that this has to do with people, then they do get this motivation, and also just to understand, how many people we are talking about. I think the size, the numbers, that's an important argument as well.
I think that might be the most valuable feedback you can get, almost. I mean, being so expressive about something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think here in the Netherlands, we had a company that actually aimed at higher educated people and young people. So they would get access to this company, and so they get better numbers. So I can imagine that if they say like, "Hey, we can filter out all people with disabilities. Let's do it." If that is the attitude that they have, then you have to change the entire attitude and maybe even the mission of a company to change something like that.
Yeah. But I think there are like millions of potential clients out there that are just not aware and who are easier to turn around than these, the small proportion of idiots. I tend to leave them where they are. They have to live the rest of their lives with themselves, and that's punishment enough, I think.
Let's hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can't find them, let them live with themselves.
Yeah. I'm not looking for them. I'm looking for the rest. I think we still have like 90% of the, people who don't know about accessibility. They could do much better, and they would like to if they, if they understand the why and the how, then you can support them to do something better. Maybe it won't be perfect, but at least it will. You get to start somewhere.
Yeah, and I also, I mean, when you work in accessibility, it's really nice to see people do it perfectly. We can discuss about the details and pick technique A or B, but in the end, every little bit helps, I guess. Every little bit to improve the situation for people with disabilities is already valuable. And it's tough when people see accessibility requirements as the maximum and not as a minimum. But
but I think what we try to do is to not start with the audit or the the requirements or something like that, but really to start with the internal process, is to make sure that people are made aware and understand how to work with this, so that they need to build their own competencies. They need to have processes for the testing and things. So really the internal processes of this in any kind of organization, I think, is the most important part. And also to get the leadership on board, and not only have like one ambassador who's trying to do everything, but build a team around it, and all these things. No, it's not sort of unique thinking, but I think we have been more successful, or our clients have been more successful, when we have started there, instead of just pointing to your alt texts are crappy, because then it becomes such a small issue, and you need to see the big picture. Otherwise, it's really hard to also to get the budget to do remediation.
Yeah, so trying to make it personal works better than just giving numbers.
Yeah.
They're used to numbers usually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering if we have any last questions from chatting. If there are any questions, I would like to hear them, because I think you told us a lot. At least it's given me a lot of clarity. So we have our deadline with a very specific audience here in September. The next year we have another deadline, right?
Yep.
Also September, but then 2021, as they call it.
Yeah, it's June.
Then it's in June. Okay.
It's a typical commission logic. It has been September for years and years, and the last one is in June.
Of course. Okay, so what happens next year?
So in the 23rd of June, the apps need to be accessible. That is the last grace period. So that is the last sort of deadline when the apps also need to comply. So that is what is happening. And then, of course, next year is also where the first monitoring is probably happening. I mean, they could start now, but I don't know of any country that is really doing it yet. So I think most of it will happen 2021, and then they will also report back to the Commission, which is extremely interesting, of course, because then we will be able to do the comparison, and we will see what is actually working and what is not working.
Yeah,
and the
whole monitoring experience that will be shared between countries.
It will be shared with the Commission, and the Commission will then decide what to do with it. But hopefully, it will be a transparent exercise, and at least the sort of high-level monitoring bodies will, of course, share this. But my hope is that everything will be transparent, at least on the high level, so that you can compare sectors or countries with each other. But I doubt that all the member states will accept a complete transparency, unfortunately. Yeah. But this will also probably be run by this observatory that should be up and running at that time.
It could be interesting because all the countries are trying something new. So it would be nice to share what works and what doesn't, of course.
Yeah.
So that's probably
and also happen. I think no, but I think the monitoring agency are really they are really active, and they want to learn from each other. So that's also a community. There are at least two different sort of networks, spontaneous networks, working together with the monitoring agencies in the different countries, who are also trying to share experiences and knowledge on how to do things, because there are a lot of good ideas out there on how to make the accessibility statements work better, and also how to make the monitoring processes more efficient and so on. So maybe some countries are talking about providing I think that is also in the Netherlands, to have some kind of central system where you sort of you publish your accessibility statement on your website, but you're also sending at least the data to a central system, so that the monitoring will be much easier.
So it should be registered somehow.
You report to the monitoring authority instead of them looking after looking for the statements.
That sounds like at least some could solve some issues.
And using metadata and just organizing it in a better way, making everything look the same way, have all the have templates for things, and that I think there are a lot of things that can be done to make it more efficient, the whole process. So I'm sure some countries will do better than others in this respect, and then hopefully you can learn from each other. And also the specific monitoring. I'm very, very curious about some of the member states, how they are going to solve it, and how much will be automated. And the most important part from my perspective is how much they will involve the users, because that's actually written into the Implementation Act, that you are, or it's in an article in the directive, that the user should be involved in the monitoring process. So that will be to look at. Yeah.
They are obliged to include users?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But
it doesn't say how, but you are supposed to. Yeah.
Okay. Could you give an example of how that could work?
Well, one thing that we have sort of promoted in the implementation acts is that part of the, not all interfaces are going to be monitored at the same time, because that would be unreasonably expensive to do. So the in-depth monitoring is going to be done on a smaller proportion of the interfaces. And then in the selection process of this, there are a lot of criteria on how you select which websites or services or documents that you're going to monitor each monitoring period. And in that selection phase, one of the criteria is really to discuss with or include, I can't remember I should know this, I've written it, but
I think you've written more than I can mention right now. So yeah,
it's to have a discussion with representatives for the disabled persons organizations or with individuals with disabilities to make sure that the selection is also relevant for this user group. So that is one way that you should include the users in this. Which websites are we going to monitor? That there are several selection criteria, but really the input from the user organizations is one of the criteria.
Okay, I've got another question that I really like. When there are internal systems within organizations, for example, for employees, they might not be even reachable for a monitoring body. So how's that going to happen?
Yeah, very good question. That is a difference between I don't know if these are Dutch people. I can't read Dutch, so I haven't read the sort of pre-work to the law. I've had the law translated for me, but I can't read all the details of the background documents. So, but in many member states, it's actually written that the monitoring agency has the right to be let into this system, or they have the right to require some kind of reports from the system itself. So it will be then the public sector body who has this internal system. They will have to make some kind of test or prove how it is if they don't let the monitoring body in there. But I don't know exactly how that is written in the Dutch legislation.
That sounds pretty big, actually.
It is very big. But my gut feeling is that the most monitoring will be performed in the public websites, because they have enough to do with them, and that's also easier. And it's also, the aim of this, the idea, the ambition of the legislator was really, first of all, the sort of external part of the websites more than the internal ones. I think the anti-discrimination legislation at national level, and also the employment or workforce, what do you call it, labor market security and things like that. That kind of legislation is really more suitable for internal systems, because I think that is really how you sort of take care of your staff. That is something completely different than what the legislator is trying to do with the Web Accessibility Directive. So.
And I'm thinking further, like, what websites do I need to log into? Let's say I do my taxes. That's also a federal website that needs a password and a user. So monitoring systems would also need access to that, I guess.
Yeah, if you can't do the monitoring in another way. I mean, sometimes it's you can look under the hood without declaring your your web. I mean, we do these audits all the time, also in banks, without moving money. So there are ways to do that. I think really, in reality, I think the apps will be the biggest problems, because that's really that's much more difficult to do from somewhere else than the web-based things.
Because apps are more a closed system, you mean, or?
Yeah. And some of the accessibility issues appear just sort of on the specific smartphone, because the app is using parts of the smartphone, and the smartphone, that is then software, and that's not part of the legislation. So how on earth are you going to measure that? That's a tricky one.
Okay, so it's about basically where is the border between what is?
Yeah, the limit. Yeah, the limit.
Ah, that sounds like a challenge indeed. And what
It is.
have you done something in this field already or tried something?
Yeah, we have some work and some research done, but the sort of the answer to this is nowhere to be found right now. I'm not sure how it will be, what the solution will be, but we are working on it. But we don't have any. We need to also work together with the monitoring agencies to see what they like to do, and I think some of the problems or potential problems we see is a bit too ambitious. Maybe they won't touch it that deep as we want to go, but it will become very interesting when it starts happening more. And we're doing client work on apps already, of course, because yeah, it's a big issue. But the monitoring will be interesting. But there
Yeah.
are many interesting parts. I mean, also like the Swedish legislation also covers parts of social media. So we have widened the scope in the sense of the use of social media. So as far as reasonable or something like that, you should use the accessibility features of the social media. And I like the idea, I like the principle behind it, but I find it absolutely impossible to monitor.
Be-
I don't see how they're going to do that.
in what way is social media included then?
So if you are using a third-party solution, so like Instagram, for example, or Facebook or something, then of course you as a public sector body, you can't require Facebook to become completely accessible, because that would be unreasonable. But if you use that channel, then it's your responsibility to actually make use of the built-in accessibility features that are there. So if there is a possibility to write an alternative text, then you should write an alternative text. If there's a possibility to have captioning, then you should use the captioning. So all the features that the social media have there, and they are quite many of them, so then that is what you are supposed to use.
So you should do your best with the tools at hand, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But how do you measure that? How do you monitor that?
Yeah. So I guess there's going to be a job for somebody being on social media all day.
Yep. Yes, exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can write the job opening already then. I think, yeah, I've seen some more questions. Oh, from the same person that asked earlier about the internal systems. How do they check if all systems are listed, all internal systems? I assume it's not
They
possible,
can't.
right?
They can't. No, no, no,
No.
they can't. And really, I mean, really, there is no member state. I think I can promise this. There is no member state in the European Union that can claim to know all the interfaces that are covered by the legislation. No one knows. They don't have any lists about what kind of websites and apps and documents are out there. They just don't know.
So I guess a lot of it depends on the user then as well.
Well, in my view, public sector bodies usually are honest people. They don't hide their intranets from a monitoring body. I can't see that happening. So I think they will tell. Maybe they won't sort of brag about it, but but if the tax authority gets a question from a monitoring body about how many interfaces do you have, do you really think they're going to lie? I don't think so.
I don't ask many questions to the tax authority. Usually they don't
That's
just
very
reply. Yeah,
yeah.
they
That's
just say
okay. But
nothing.
another one, just another authority than the tax authority then.
Yeah,
But
but yeah, lying is even more painful, of course. But yeah, I don't know how it works. I mean, sooner or later, commercial companies will be also under this legislation.
yeah, under the next directive, but yes. And then we have another problem, but that will be another kind of monitoring. So it's not a official monitoring. It's not the policing thing. They will be probably monitor. I mean, the implementation acts are not written yet for the accessibility, the European Accessibility Act. So that is now being done. But but the way it is prepared, so to speak, is that like industry organizations or other kind of organizations going to take care of the enforcement. So this will be another another challenge, I guess.
So you're not done yet.
Oh no, absolutely not. 2025 is far away.
Only for the people that haven't heard of you yet. I think it's pretty
Yeah.
close. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for the banks are, they are already working on this, but yeah. But there will be a completely different setup of the monitoring, and yeah, there are other challenges when the Commission wants to require things from commercial companies, and also, I mean, for the services that are maybe provided from outside of the EU but sold inside of the EU. That's, it's much more tricky than the public sector. The public sector, they can not do what they want, but they are in the same group of the same kind of organization, so it's much easier than the commercial ones.
Yeah. Okay. I think I've ran out of questions for now. We can talk a lot more, but I think you've answered a lot already. Maybe we should talk again in 4 years. I don't know. I don't know if I'll be streaming still. Would be nice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much so far. I'm gonna say good night for all those people that are in the same time zone, or good time zone for wherever you are. And I'm gonna press the big button that says stop streaming. So thank you so much, and thank you for all the knowledge you had to share.